Hi, everyone. Welcome to journey number 15. And today we have Dr. Keith Belliveau on. Dr. Keith is a chiropractor here in Calgary and is the co-owner of Curo Chiropractic. And how are you doing today, Keith?
I'm great. Yeah, thanks. How are you doing?
Very good. We were just talking a little bit before here about the holidays and how they were a little bit different this year, but different isn't always bad. So
Totally. Yeah, I think it's going to make next Christmas that much better.
yeah, for sure. I think,
Yeah.
that's one of the things about this year is it just really, at least for me, has brought the important things to the forefront. Has kind of shown me
Yeah.
when you have to put effort into basically everything, deciding who you're going to spend time with, who you're going to reach out to, who you're going to stay connected with, what you're going to do with your time when you're so limited. It really kind of shows you what's important and what kind of falls by the wayside.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think it also shows like what all the things we take for granted, like everyone going back for their first Flames game after this year, or like the Stampede next year if it goes on, or my first yoga class back packed into a room with a bunch of people.
Yeah.
It's going to be that much better realizing, wow, this isn't something that's just automatic.
Yeah, for sure. And even like you're the little things too of even just giving somebody a hug and not having to worry about it, right?
Totally, man. Yeah.
Anyways, so I guess to start off here, I'd love to just hear a little bit more about yourself. Going back to what kind of kid you were, where you grew up, what you're doing now, kind of how everything that led you up to this point.
Cool. Yeah. I'm born and raised in Calgary. So I've been here my whole life, except for my time in grad school down in California. And I did a semester abroad in undergrad. But other than that, lived in Calgary always. Yeah. So I kind of grew up in like the southwest part of Calgary, a little bit in the southeast down in like Douglasdale. But for the most part, like my circle of where I've lived has been pretty small, kind of through Altadore and up into like West Hills area. And that's where our practice is now. And that's kind of where I live now. So it's been cool to kind of see the city grow over the years. But for me personally, um, grew up definitely active, love being outside, love playing sports. I started skateboarding at like a super young age. There was this house up the street from me. Do you remember this store, like the Source Skateboards?
Yes. Yeah.
It was on 17th, where less 17 is now. There was a couple of guys that worked there that lived up the street from me, and they were just like super cool dudes, and they were just always out like skateboarding on this rail on the front street. And as a kid, you just kind of like see older people doing stuff, and you're like, oh, that looks kind of sweet. And then I got into skateboarding at like 6 years old.
Wow.
So I was like that random, like way too young of a kid to be at the skate park always.
Yeah.
So that was cool. And then started snowboarding like not that far after that, maybe at like 7 or 8. So I definitely was like into the board sports at a very young age. Then I got into football and then a couple other sports, played rugby a bit. And now I spend a bit more time golfing and stuff like that, less contact sports. Still love to get out snowboarding and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of like been my life. I've always had like an active life. I decided in like high school to be a chiropractor. I had a really awesome chiropractor. My mom was seeing someone. She started seeing a chiropractor when I was a little bit younger, maybe like 12 or so. She went to one clinic and like I went there a couple times. I wouldn't say it inspired me at all. I don't think she loved it there. So if it ended there, I probably would have never been a chiropractor. But then she switched and she started seeing like this amazing chiropractor, and I started seeing him, and he quickly became the person I was going to with like all of my health issues. I was never that impressed with my interactions at like with my medical or physiotherapists. It was always kind of like, hey, am I wasting my time even doing this? Like, you're just kind of trying to get me out the door. Nothing's really changing. I was never really that impressed with their knowledge on the body. I never walked away from appointments like, oh, that was really good insight. But that started to happen with my chiropractor. Every single time I'd go in with like a sports injury, football injury, snowboard injury, he would always be able to kind of like have a good perspective on like how to manage it, how to help, adjust me and work me through it. But then also other stuff, like when I had questions about like, I don't know, brain fog, or I was going to the gym and I was doing this or that. He always had like awesome insights. And I was like, man, this guy truly is like an expert of the human body. And that was in high school times. I was taking like a sports medicine class, and I thought it was just fascinating learning about injuries and anatomy. And then, yeah, I'd sort of in high school was like, cool, well, that looks like a pretty good job. So what do I do to do that? And he was like, well, probably start with like an undergrad in kinesiology and then go from there. So I did that, did an undergrad in kines. And then at the end of that, I kind of like reassessed all my options and then decided, yeah, you know what, like between all the things that are possible coming out of Kines, chiro is still the one I want to do. And then here we are.
Very cool. And just going back to the skateboarding, it's so funny. If I haven't thought about this in years, I remember when I was really young, I had a skateboard. I wouldn't call myself a skateboarder, but I had a skateboard. And I don't even think I could like travel on it. I'm pretty sure I would like sit in my garage and just like tip back and forth.
Yeah.
Try to figure out how to do a jump and like never even getting close to it. So it had a
Yeah.
really cool memory pop up for me there. But um, going back to deciding to become a chiropractor, you said you decided in high school. Did you think you were going to do something else before then, or were you still figuring it out?
I was pretty open to options at that
Yeah.
point. I think I kind of wanted to be in like more real estate, like do more land development and that kind of
Oh,
stuff. Um, so that was something that did kind of pique my interest. But I think I was pretty open at that point.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
very cool. It's always interesting. I love asking people because some people, it seems, they've known from a very young age of like, this is specifically what I want to do. And some people, it seems like they change their mind every month until they find the thing. And, there's just everything in between as well. And so I'm always curious to ask people that. And now going to school, you went to school in California, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
And how was that? Well, being in Calgary your entire life, and all of a sudden kind of moving there, and how long were you there for? What was that experience? Did you enjoy it? Did you not enjoy it? um, did you go in with a different idea, at what you thought it was going to be, as opposed to when you actually got there and the reality of it?
Yeah, so I was there for like 4 years. I think overall it was like a super positive experience. People were great, and obviously like could have met people if I was in Minnesota or wherever I was. So the people were great, but that's aside from California. California was awesome. There's a lot of things I loved about it. There's a lot of things I did not like about it. Like a lot of people would always ask, like, are you gonna try to stay there after school? Like, oh, how are you ever gonna come back to Canada or Calgary? And it's like very much voluntarily, I'm gonna come back to Calgary. Like California was cool. There's a lot of good things about it. There's a lot of bad things about it. And I think you're seeing that now. A lot of the celebrities that have been based in California, a lot of them are leaving. A lot of companies are leaving California. I think there was probably a sweet spot for California. I don't know if it was like in the 50s or 60s or 70s before like everyone in America realized, hey, you know what? I can go live like the beach life. And there's probably small pockets in California that are like perfect, but at the end of the day, you have to leave that little pocket and realize like you're in a state that's has its own issues, I guess you could say. Um, but the school was awesome. Yeah, I loved the experience. And yeah, what else? What else did you want me to sort of dive into there?
Just kind of anything that came up, like one of the interesting parts for me is, also born and raised in Calgary. Luckily last year I got to do a bunch of traveling, but before that I never really went outside of this kind of sphere. Like I did a lot in Alberta, but not a lot of traveling abroad. And for me, for whatever reason, Calgary has always felt like home, right?
Mm,
And when I visit other places, it always feels like visiting, and it's like, okay, I'm ready to go home now. And I've never had the huge pull to specifically move anywhere. And yeah, and I'm always interested to get people's take on that, because some people, it seems like they like to move around and just change their environment up a lot of times. Sometimes they have a specific destination, and specifically being California, and like you're talking about, it kind of has this almost call it aura around it of being
yeah.
the place to be, and that beach lifestyle, and the rich and famous are there, and everything like that. And so yeah, it was just wanted some insight on, you know I think a lot of people, when they hear that you got to spend 4 years in California, just like you said, say, oh, well, why would you ever go back? Right. And so that's why I
Yeah.
was just kind of curious on your experiences there and what you thought of it. And yeah.
Cool. So yeah, I would say before, like when I was probably at undergrad age, let's say 21, 22, I was definitely of the mindset, like, why would I continue to live in Calgary just because I was born here? Doesn't mean I need to spend the rest of my life here. Like the world is my oyster, whatever you think, as a 21, 22-year-old person.
Yeah.
And then I went on a study abroad, and that was in Europe, and I traveled around Europe there. And that was cool. Obviously, Europe is really, really neat. Really great place to be, really great place to live, especially as a Canadian, because it's very similar culturally and standard of living and that kind of stuff. And that is one place, like I was pretty dead set for a while. I wanted to move to the Netherlands. I
Okay.
really loved it there. When I was on study abroad, I went to the Netherlands twice. Like I loved it so much the first time I went back, and really fell in love with it. Great culture, great lifestyle. Maybe not quite as like outdoorsy as here, but still everything else seemed awesome. Um, and that's even when I was in Cairo school. I still thought that, like, if anything, I'm not gonna move to America. I'm probably gonna move either to Europe or go back to Canada. But yeah, some of the things with California I didn't love. So some of the things I did love. Let's start with that. Weather is fantastic. Like you can't argue with that, especially being in Calgary and having to kind of endure less than ideal weather,
Yeah.
where it's like dumping snow and just going and getting groceries is a task, where it's like that is one nice thing where like your daily tasks are never really being affected by the weather. A little bit of rain here and there, but that's not too bad. Just access to so much stuff. You can drive an hour in one direction, you're at the beach, drive an hour in another direction, you're at a major city. You can go to the mountains, you can go to the beach, you can go to, some of these awesome cities that are all very close to each other and all very different. So you can have different cultural experiences, different like geographical experiences, all within a short drive. So that was cool. Obviously, there's a lot of like neat things around that you're like, Golden State Warriors are playing right here, and there's Google right there. There's all these like cool businesses because there's just so much money. There's like a major economy in California. So there's a lot of businesses that are able to thrive in that environment. So I'd say that's all like the good stuff. The bad stuff is like the government doesn't really do anything. Like, I don't know where all these tax dollars go, but like the roads are all terrible. There's garbage everywhere. There's crime everywhere. There's zero police presence. So it definitely gives you a feeling of like, Europe feels like Western Europe, I guess we could say, feels very safe. Canada feels very safe. It feels very much like things are in control, and there's direction and there's strategy and things are being taken care of and the citizens are being taken care of. And then you go down there and it's like, you don't get that same feeling. You get the feeling that a lot of people are going through life not being taken care of, feeling a little disenfranchised. For every like Lambo you see driving down the freeway, you also see like a 92 whatever car that's uninsured and it's dragging its muffler down the road. And you just don't see that level of disparity in Canada, and it's not in like a good way. Like the person driving the 92 whatever Corolla dragging its muffler down the freeway, you can tell, and because you go see them in stores or you go see those people around, and they're not like super jazzed about their life situation. They don't believe in the trickle down effect of the capitalist economy they're in or this or that. You can tell they don't feel super happy with the life that they have, and they resent people that live in the Lambo lifestyle. So and then there's that's like a social stratification, and also like racial, and those are often tied together in states. So there's this underlying almost like tension that exists that doesn't exist in Canada. And Canada just really feels like everyone's on the same team. We're all on the ship together and we're all in this thing together. And one can kind of make it in Canada and like make it whatever that means. But anyone make a good life for themselves. And there's not as many barriers to that. In America, you really do notice it and feel it. And that bleeds into just like your day-to-day interactions. Like people are a little bit more guarded, and obviously when you live somewhere with so many people, that's just naturally going to happen. It probably happens more in Toronto and Vancouver than it does here.
Mm-hmm.
But that's also another thing, is like I would come back to Calgary and be like, okay, we have some snow we got to deal with part of the year, but we have like awesome people. We have the nicest people that are super intelligent, super open-minded, and are of this like team and us mindset. And that's like, it's hard to put a price on that.
I love that. No, that's a great insight, and it was really kind of put into perspective how different things were. Where I was talking to another friend of mine, and he went down to Silicon Valley for a little bit, and one of his experiences was, the Lambo lifestyle. And they went to this, really fancy restaurant, and there's essentially a guy asking for money outside, and he saw, this obviously extremely well-off individual get out of his Lambo, go over, drop that guy $100 bill, and then go into the restaurant. And he actually went up to him and started talking to the guy asking for money. And it turned out he was actually a professional panhandler, where that was his full-time job. And he would go and he would set up shop. He had a house, he had a family, he had everything, but he would make more money panhandling outside of this restaurant than he would at a regular job. And so that's what he did. And, he'd look scruffy and he would look like he was homeless. And then at the end of the day, he'd go home. And it was just, it's such an interesting, and completely foreign world to me just to hear that that even exists. And so, yeah, it's some of those almost subtleties that you wouldn't think of at first when you first, start
Yeah.
thinking about that.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. That's
Yeah.
actually really interesting.
Yeah.
I've heard that like some people playing their musical instruments in like the subway of New York, they can make some pretty good money. But yeah, I didn't realize this guy was doing that instead of a job. And he was like, this is pretty chill. I just sit here, people watch, ask for some money. Some people give it to me voluntarily.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it blew my mind. And so I still think about it a lot. But anyways, switching
Yeah.
gears a little bit. And, I think one of the things I was really maybe most excited to talk to you about was the idea of being a young professional, right? And especially like for yourself with the title of a doctor. And
Yeah.
when people usually think about, doctors or professionals, they think a little bit older. They think you have that experience, you have that base knowledge. And yeah, I was just really curious to get some of your experiences on being a young professional and, treating a lot of people that I imagine are older than yourself. Because, it's something that I've run into a lot in, my career where, having to go and be the professional or be the expert to somebody that is sometimes twice your age, and how you
Yeah.
kind of navigate that. Have you run into people not taking you seriously, and, just kind of what have you done when you run into that?
Yeah, I would say I've run into it a little bit. I'd say it was more when I was fresh out of school, even though it wasn't that many years ago. And I probably didn't look all that different or all that younger. I probably just had maybe a younger energy about me. I don't know what it was. I was also associate in clinics too, an associate. So I think that doesn't help when someone comes into a clinic and they're like, oh yeah, you're going to get stuck with the associate doc. And then the associate doc's this very young looking person. They're kind of like, what is this? I wouldn't say I got many people like actually refusing care or saying anything that was that demeaning or belittling. Just more like, oh, you're young doc, cool. So just little comments like that, and who knows whether that was a factor in any of my patients' decisions to not comply with care I recommended or this or that. It's impossible for me to know that. But I would say it was definitely like an aspect of it was in the back of my head at times where it was like, okay, I probably shouldn't go clean shaven, and now I will go clean shaven. I have a bit of facial hair right now, but I will go clean shaven. It obviously takes a couple of years off me, but it's different now. Like being a clinic owner, you've almost like proven your concept a little bit. And I think that's true with anything is we're looking for like signals of competence, so if I was going to go hire like an accountant or a lawyer and I had no personal connections to any of them and I was going to maybe sit down with a few of them, if one of them was super young and one of them was maybe 15, 20 years older, you'd usually expect, okay, 15, 20 years more experience is going to be helpful. But then there's the flip side of that, which is like this person that's maybe younger, maybe they know the most up-to-date practices. They're not stuck in their old ways. They don't have these old things that aren't relevant in today's age, or they didn't get updated knowledge. So that can kind of go both ways. And the one thing that really I think's tipped the scales to people is if you're young and then you've proven yourself in one way or another that what you're doing is a good way to do things, then people are like, sweet. So back to like the accountant or the lawyer or who, whatever other professional I can kind of relate to being on the client side of things. If they're young, but they're getting amazing results with all their clients and are doing things up into like the most updated modern way, the way that's going to give the best results and do it the best way possible, then sweet, like by all means, it doesn't really matter your age. And I think that's really one thing that I've noticed is now that we're Dr. Soner and I are clinic owners, and people come in and it's a nice clinic, they're almost like, oh, cool, you guys are young, but you obviously are doing something right. So sweet. But I think before, yeah, like I would wear more dress shirts and tuck them into my pants and try to like look the part a little bit more. Cause it's like, I can't look like a kid and then also be all haphazardly dressed and then be the associate doctor in the back of the clinic and doing all that. That's probably not going to be good PR for me. But yeah, I think that's the progression as you kind of grow into your own skin. You're kind of like, okay, this is maybe I don't need to tuck my shirt in every day and wear a proper collared dress shirt every day. And I can wear a bit more comfortable clothes that's going to allow me to do my job better. And I don't need to be as worried about, you know, necessarily people's perception of my age now, because I think like the concept has been proven.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm curious, and I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but just from what you were saying too, of you don't necessarily look all that different than when you first started. Do you
Yeah.
think, like, how much do you think of it has to do with how you carry yourself? Do you think that,
Yeah.
people can just tell by the way that you're carrying yourself? And even though you now, like as a clinic title, for sure, sorry, as a clinic owner, that title helps you.
Hmm.
How much do you think it's actually more so those intangibles of how you're carrying yourself? Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, totally. I think that's probably a huge factor as well. Because before it would kind of be like, yeah, a patient comes in with a certain case, and I don't necessarily know how it's going to turn out. Or maybe I've seen it on a couple people, but they were maybe of different age demographics, fitness levels, this or that. So I didn't necessarily know how it was going to turn out. So there was probably a little bit of uncertainty with me as to like, hey, this is what's going to happen. These are my recommendations. This is what we're going to do first. This is what we're going to do second. This is how things are going to progress. There was probably a little bit more guesswork, and I think people can definitely pick up on that versus like, and that's the nice thing about, Dr. Sohn and I, we both were quite successful right out of the gate after school in terms of being able to see lots of different cases, and that just gives us more and more data points. Seeing a young teenager through an injury versus like a 60-year-old person who's been sedentary for the last 20 years versus young female versus an older male, someone who's fit, someone who's not fit, and the severity of some of these injuries. We really now have seen a lot of stuff, and we know how it sort of ends up. We've seen it through its whole cycle. So now we do have definitely a lot more confidence in that, but also just in what we do, because we're now knowing, okay, these are the effects of what we do. We've seen enough cases through that it's like, if we do this, this is what's going to happen. And I think that like that certainty is such a big part of it. Yeah, you're totally right there.
For sure. Yeah. And why this topic excites me so much is because, I've been fortunate enough where a lot of the positions that I've held have been, I've had a lot of responsibility. And a lot of
Yeah.
times I've either been serving people or in charge of people that are a lot older than me. And, kind of the biggest, the biggest contrast in that was when I first started and I was running my little painting business. And, I'm this 19-year-old kid that's showing up to these, adults' houses and saying, please pay me, $4,000 to paint your house.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
so obviously, in that situation, especially from the outside looking in, there's a lot of hesitation sometimes on like, am I really going to trust this kid who doesn't necessarily have a ton of experience in it, who, I don't really know if they know what they're doing. And, it was such a big difference from my first year to my second year. And again, I don't think I looked all that different, but I think the way that I carried myself was extremely different. I had the answers. I had seen different things. I could draw on my past experiences. And, even though, yes, I did have, past projects to show them, I think it was so much more about how I carried myself. And the other thing too is one of the things I realized was a lot of times you're not going to change someone's mind of, if
Hmm.
they don't
Yeah.
accept you because of your age, a lot of times you're not going to be able to convince them. And so
Hmm.
trying not to convince them and putting my energy into, I know that I'm good at this. I know that this is what I can do. And I know that these are my skills, and it's up to you if you're going to accept them or not. But, being confident in the fact that that I know what I'm doing here, and just kind of moving on from there instead of just, harping on them or changing my approach or whatever it might be to try to convince them that, I know what I'm doing. It's just kind of leaving it there and letting them make the decision for themselves.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think you're right. It's really hard to change people's minds on certain judgments they have because, this age thing aside, but whatever it is, usually any evidence you try to produce of like, hey, your belief is maybe a little bit superficial or it's unfounded or this or that, any evidence you provide there, that just provokes now debate. And now it's like in their mind, whether they're doing it out loud or not, now they're coming up with counter arguments about why your points aren't valid and why their points have validity from this perspective or this perspective. And we see it all the time with like American politics. That would be one really simple one where it's like, no matter how good your point is about whatever the topic is, whether they're saying it out loud or in their own head, they're coming up with counter argument, counterpoint in their own head, just because that's on some of these things, that's how we've almost been trained to think, or maybe not trained to think, maybe that's just how we naturally think, is this is my belief. And, like debate class is a prime example of that, where you just dig your heels in regardless of which side of it you're on. It's like usually just a very random topic that you've just been selected to, argue one side of it, and then you might switch halfway. But our brain is really good at like discounting other people's points and then like trying to find other ways to support our own viewpoints. So yeah, I think you're right. Like a lot of times it is really hard to change people's beliefs on certain things. And that's like a lot of things in the world at large. That's been my kind of take over the last few years, because there's been so many things where we're like, we need to see change immediately. We need to like, we decided we're going to change this thing last year, and we need to change in public perception immediately. And my take is like true change is going to happen more like through the generations, like did any of our grandparents who were a little bit racist, did they really change their views on race, or did they just become a little bit more quiet with them? And did they just not say so much stuff out loud? Or like, did they really change the neural networks, or are they just more quiet about some of that stuff? And I think so many things are that way, where like once someone has a certain belief and they're not willing to do the work, because it does take a lot of work to challenge your beliefs and create new, if they're not willing to do that, it's not going to happen just from a couple conversations or a couple articles or a couple this or podcasts or this or that. It's going to take like a lot more work for someone to change their perspective.
For sure. No, and I resonate with that a ton. And I think one of the big things as well is that it's this idea that I'm right, you're wrong whenever we're arguing, right? And it's 100%. Yeah. And a lot of times, like you were saying, that kind of leads to two different reactions. One, either I am going to dig my heels in so hard that no matter what you say, no matter how valid your point is, I'm going to fight against it with everything that I have, because, I feel like a lot of times we use shame almost as a weapon, right? Of you shouldn't think this way, you shouldn't be this way, on whatever it is. Of again,
totally.
You're wrong. You are wrong for your beliefs.
This year has been full of that, right?
Exactly. And so it's automatic. I'm going to dig my heels in, and now you've moved me farther away from where you want me to go. Or totally. On the flip side, like you were saying, or sometimes we just shut down, right? And we shut down and we don't actually change our thinking. We just don't talk about it. Right? We keep it to ourselves. We keep it quiet. We keep it hidden, which a lot of times, in my opinion, I don't think that leads to change, or at least any meaningful change. And a lot of times it can actually sometimes make it worse, right? If you're not able to talk about issues, wherever you stand on them. And, that idea of having a conversation and trying to understand each other doesn't necessarily mean one's right, one's wrong all the time, but at least inviting that conversation to talk it out. Not just you have to drop every single thing that you've ever believed and now come over to my side because I'm the right side. It's, well, let's talk about why you have those beliefs. Let's talk about why you think that way, or like ask me questions about it. And yeah, it's something that I've put a lot of thought into, of how to actually cause change or invite change into the things that we care about by approaching it in different ways.
Yeah, totally. During the start of the whole like lockdown and pandemic thing, that's something I had to keep reminding people, and I had to keep reminding myself of this, is like the phrase I was using is like, whatever your take is on like the masks or the lockdown, or whether you want to see people. And this is like, obviously we've gone through phases of where we were maybe more open to do stuff and we were allowed to, and now we're not allowed to do much. So it's less of a choice. But the phrase I always kind of would pop into conversations and remind people and myself is like, whatever your take is on this, personally, you're right. Like you're right if you want to stay home and don't want to see anyone. You're right for yourself if you want to go and like play some sports outside with your friends. Obviously before it was a bylaw against that, but back when we were a little bit more free to do that. And not like I think so many people are spending so much mental energy trying to convince other people that their way of doing things is the right way, and their take on this COVID situation is the right take and their take is wrong. It's like, we just need to give people a little bit more credit that they can come to their own conclusions and their opinion is equally as valid as yours is. And that's I think that was helpful. That was helpful for a lot of the people around me, that like we started to think that way, and that was helpful for me. Because instead of like you have a certain belief or perspective or viewpoint, and then therefore everyone else must be wrong, because like if yours is right, then how could theirs be totally different and also right? So it's really easy to fall into that. Like if you don't believe what I believe, and I believe, if you know, I believe what I believe for a reason, and I think it's right, it's really easy to fall into that. So I think the more we can realize, okay, I'm one person, I have my previous life experiences, and that's led me to see things in a certain way, and you have different life experiences, and that's led you to believe things in a different way or see things in a different way. Doesn't mean mine's more valuable than yours. They're just going to be different, and that doesn't, we don't need to agree on stuff. But I also don't try to need to convince you that what I'm doing is right and what you're doing is wrong.
For sure. Yeah. And, I think that's one of the, in my opinion, that's one of the hardest things about COVID is that, there's so much gray. It's
Hmm.
not, two sides anymore. It's not like you either think this way or you think that way. There's so much, just so much gray in between both extremes, and everybody fits somewhere slightly different. And
Totally.
like you're saying, it's just, yeah, it's, you can't be you can't be right and make everybody else wrong in the entire world, right? It's right for
Totally.
you, because it's
Yeah.
not like, oh, half of the side sees it this way and half of it sees it that way. It's like there's so many unique perspectives on it, drawing on all of your experiences, drawing on your personal beliefs, your risk tolerance, everything like that, that makes everybody's take on it a little bit different, and which makes
Yeah.
it so hard to find any common ground.
Totally. Yeah, I think you're totally right. And that highlights one more thing. What can we talked about, like risk tolerance, is like in so many other aspects of our life, we're willing to kind of go down to the least risky person. Like let's say you and me and five other people went skiing, and we go up to the top of the crazy run, and it's like a double black diamond down one way, or it's like a blue run down the other way. And we're all fantastic at skiing except for one person. They could never do the black diamond run. Like they're totally at the skill set of like blue. We don't like stand at the top and try to like convince them and talk them into doing it. It's either like you're going to go your way, we're going to go our way, or let's all go to the blue run, because at least we can all do that. And going down the double black, that's like putting this blue level skier in a pretty unfortunate situation, a pretty unfair situation, to force them into that what they're not comfortable with. So we do that all the time with other things, but with COVID, you really saw people being like, I'm very risk tolerant to this. I'm very much not concerned about this. And I'm going to force my decisions onto you now, regardless of your perspective on it. It's like, there's a lot of lack of courtesy around that, I think. Yeah, so that's one other thing. Back when you talked about risk tolerance, it's like that's definitely a big one, right? A lot of people are very tolerant to risk, and like, going through this whole COVID thing, that's there's obviously a small risk involved, whether it's to yourself or to someone around you, or to society as a whole. So some people are very tolerant to that, and some people are not. And rarely do we force people that are less risk tolerant in other things in our world to like try to come up to the level of the most risky. But this is something that we definitely did see, that we saw a lot of, and it worked the opposite way too. But that's a more of a fair argument. If you're someone who's risk adverse, trying to get other people to be more risk adverse, that's fair. That's something that anyone who's risk tolerant could do. They could do those actions, that's within their skill set and their wheelhouse. But the opposite isn't true. You can't just get someone who's totally risk adverse to go do something that's pretty risky and think that that's something they're comfortable doing.
Yeah, no, for sure. I resonate a ton with that. And I think, in my mind, one of the other hardest parts is that you're no longer taking on that risk only for yourself, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
now also imposing your will on other people, right?
Yeah.
Like if you want to go down the black diamond run, like awesome, you go down the black diamond run, I'll go down the blue one. There's no problem there, right? But the
Yeah,
problem comes
totally.
when like, no, I'm going to strap you to my back and you're coming down the black diamond with me.
Yeah.
And in a situation like that, it's easy to see like, oh, like you shouldn't force people to do it. And again, this is one where there's so much gray that it's just, there's so many different ways it can go. There's so many different situations. There's so many different levels of, it just makes it very tough. But
It does.
yeah, switching gears a little bit here. One of my favorite things about Kiro and you and Sohan is kind of the, call it like a holistic approach to health, where I feel like, not only in health, but in a lot of different things, there seems to be almost like an or culture around things. You do this or you do that. And
Yeah,
talking with you, with so much knowledge, it's a lot of you need to work on your physical health and your mental health, right? You need to work on your
totally.
diet and exercise and everything. Everything kind of feeding into each other, and not neglecting any one piece that is the whole body of health. And so I was just wondering if you could talk to that a little bit. And is it something you've always believed in, and just your general thoughts on how everything ties together?
Yeah, totally. Like I think what really gives you insight into how we operate at Curo is we have 5 health essentials. We have obviously spine and nervous system, which is the main thing people associate with chiropractors. So people come here with spine, nervous system problems, and we help work on those. But that's not where we leave it, and that's not where we kind of stop our work. And that's kind of what you're talking about. Is like a lot of other clinics, they're like, yeah, this is what I do. I'm a chiropractor. I work on people's spines. Anything else you need, go somewhere else for it. But for us, it's like we do, yeah, spine and nervous system. That's one of our health essentials. We have optimal nutrition, optimal exercise, optimal mindset, and then minimizing toxins into the body. And that's, like back to chiropractic school in California, it was truly some of the healthiest people I've ever been around. And it was like really, really fascinating to be around a group of people that were so healthy, but not just in their spinal health. It's not like just everyone was getting adjusted and doing good posture and doing some spinal exercises, and that was the end of it. They were truly healthy, healthy, healthy people. And it came from all these things. It came from exercising. And how do you exercise? How frequently? What are you doing? It's not just about like sitting on a recumbent bike for an hour each day. Like, there's more to it than just checking the box and saying I did something. It's like, what are you doing? Then there's nutrition. Like a nutrition, it can be obviously so complicated, but on a simple level, it's just like, don't put crap in your body, eat whole foods. And like, that's a really, really good starting point. You could literally not even put any more thought into it other than that. I'm just going to eat whole foods. And that's a really, really great starting point. So it can be complicated, it can be simple, but at the end of the day, it's like what goes into our body is super important. Mindset, that's a huge one, and that's been one that we've really started to expand upon, and especially 2020, because in my experience in practice for the last few years, on people's intake forms, the amount of people that check off stress and anxiety has been insanely high. I don't know the percentage, but I would say more people check that box than don't. In 2020, obviously that's gone even higher. And then finally, minimizing toxins. So it's like the example I often use is like, it would be such a shame if you were doing all this other stuff, going to the chiropractor, exercising, doing the work on your diet, which takes time and energy and money to go, buy the right foods, to spend the time and like the resources to work on your mindset. It would be a shame to do all that stuff and then have a bunch of toxins going into your body and throwing off your endocrine system and your nervous system, and you not being able to experience the life as good as you could just because there's toxins that are sort of just building up into your body. So those are kind of our 5 health essentials that we live by personally. And that was a big thing for us, is like, if we're going to be as healthy as we can be doing all these other things, why would we just come to the clinic and be healthcare practitioners and take the health of our patients into our hands and then just say, you know what though, like all you need to do is come here and get adjusted. Like that's it. Do these exercises at home and we're just going to take care of your spine, and that's all you need to be healthy. Where it's like, but that's not how we're living our own lives. So we have to be congruent with that as well. And it would be disingenuous for us to say not touch on any of these other topics. But you're totally right. It's like usually this and this and this and this, and it can seem overwhelming at the start, but typically it's like just small habits that we just change. We just do one at a time. Start doing this differently. Drinking more water, for example. Most people don't drink enough water. That's just one really simple thing. Once you start doing it, you just keep doing it because your body feels better and you just realize, okay, I was actually a little dehydrated. Getting enough sleep, like that's another one. Just a lot of people don't get enough sleep, and then that's another one you could start working on for a couple months, and then you're just going to keep doing it because your body feels that much better when you're sleeping. And then same with exercise and diet. Like a lot of people who don't exercise and have a poor diet, they think that all these people that are exercising regularly and eating well, they think they're just exercising so much self-discipline every single day, not realizing that once you start doing those things, you just want to keep doing them because it makes your body feel better. And the second you kind of slip back for like a week, let's say over the holidays, I know I've definitely been kind of feeling that. I'm not like, sweet, I'm going to keep eating a bunch of rich foods and I'm going to exercise less for the rest of my life. This is awesome. I'm like itching to get back I went skiing yesterday, so that was good activity. Um, but I'm itching to get back to eating cleaner again, and like exercising like every single day again. So for a lot of people, it's like realizing, okay, these little habits, it's going to take some effort at the start, but then once you start doing it, your body's just going to want to keep doing it because your body feels better and your mind feels better and everything about your experience of life just feels a little bit better. So that's kind of our approach to patient care here, and our approach to healthcare is like, absolutely, chiropractic is going to be a huge component of that. If you have issues in the spine and nervous system, that is going to bleed through your body and into your health in other ways. Even just back pain, like back pain is debilitating. um, a lot of people, most people experience it, whether it's neck pain or lower back pain. Most people experience it, and for a lot of people it's chronic. So most people can be motivated just to take care of their spine for the very reason it's going to hurt less. um, but like, let's not like let it stop there. There's so many other benefits to taking care of the spine and nervous system that are going to bleed into other systems that we just didn't realize, because the nervous system controls every system in the body. So if you have dysfunction in the nervous system, then you have dysfunction in whatever other system is being controlled by that, which is every other system. So always starting with the nervous system. That's definitely going to be the key to most people's health. If they do have problems there, it needs to be addressed.
For sure, and it was something that came up in my last conversation, and I'm glad that you brought it up too. That idea of small, consistent changes, and
Mm-hmm.
those being really the key for actual change and actual habits. And it doesn't mean that, okay, like, I'm going to be healthy tomorrow and therefore I'm going to cut out everything bad in my diet. I'm going to change my lifestyle completely. I'm going to do all of this in 24 hours. It's like it's that idea of, you're going to start making those changes, you're going to incorporate those into your lifestyle, and then incorporate more and incorporate more and incorporate more. And I think one of the things that I've come to realize is sustainable is so much more important, of making those habits
Yeah.
sustainable, habits that you can actually keep with. And again, make those meaningful changes that last for a really long time.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, it's just about creating a different life. It's just a different way to do your life. And it's unfortunate that the modern world now, we have to be a lot more conscious about it and we have to kind of construct it. You go back a few thousand years and you didn't have to think about this stuff. You were just naturally doing it. You were naturally just moving your body all day because that's your only way to do anything. That's your only way to get around. You had to go walk there. There was a lot less, obviously, automation and machinery, so a lot of stuff was done by hand. You naturally were sort of like sitting amongst a smaller group in your community that you were very, very close with, your family, extended family, and like those probably that lived around you. And you would naturally just meet up with this group of people on a daily basis, sit around, relax through the evening, tell stories, be involved in everyone's lives. We would naturally be helping people through, like any issues that they're having. The communication was probably a lot more open back then. And then obviously a lot less toxins going into our body, because a lot of our toxins now are coming from chemical processing. So there was just a lot less of that naturally back then. And then everyone was eating of, very much a paleo, clean, organic, non-GMO diet, because that's how food was. There was no other option back then. There was no processed foods. There was no pesticides or herbicides. So now it's unfortunate. We have to be a lot more conscious about how we live our lives. But once you kind of build it in a certain way, and again, you just like kind of you put one building block here. This is how I'm going to sleep. This is my diet. This is how I'm going to exercise. This is how I'm going to set up my life at home. This is how much time I'm going to spend sitting in front of the TV. This is how much I'm going to read books. Once you start making a lot of those decisions and start acting on them and actually executing, then it just becomes, that's just how you go through life. And that's just what you naturally do. Because so much of what we do is just subconscious programming, right? Like, we're not conscious throughout the day of like every single thing we're doing, every choice we're making. A lot of it is just making the same decision over and over again. So it's better if we can make those healthier decisions automatic, and then they're not decisions anymore. It's just what we do.
For sure. Yeah. I love that. And, switching gears again a little bit, something that I've been thinking about a lot, the last little while here, is this idea of, call it modern masculinity, of,
Mm.
what does it mean to be, a healthy, conscious man in today's age? And when I say that to you, what are some of the things that come to mind? And what are some of the, call it like, you know traditional looks on masculinity to, being a strong man, compared to how you think about it now. And, what are some of those that still ring true? What are some of them that, you've changed? Just kind of some general thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would say like the things that remain true to a certain extent is that like there are obviously gender differences, there are biological differences, and there's different neurochemistry and different hormones running through males and females bodies that allow us to take on certain roles with more ease. So I think realizing, okay, there are going to be definitely some differences, but I think one of the big things that society is getting better at right now is realizing a lot of these toxic male behaviors, we can't just chalk that up to like, it's just guy being a guy. We don't need to give guys the pass on certain things that are very destructive toxic behaviors. And I think that's one big thing that's happening now with like the masculinity movement is there's definitely differences in how we're going to conduct ourselves as males and females and things we're naturally going to be good at, but we don't need to excuse a lot of inexcusable behavior by just saying, oh, it's just guy being a guy, so I think for a guy being someone who's you know not necessarily overly emotional, but allowed to show emotion. That's like the more modern. It used to be this false dichotomy, kind of like what you were saying before about how I was like in with health, oftentimes it's presented as like an either or. I think that's what's happening with gender is we're realizing, okay, you can be a strong leader, the cornerstone of the family in terms of certain things, but you can also show your emotion. And I think what we're also realizing is just over the years, we've kind of been duped into thinking that women played such a minor role in the household and in politics and in businesses and in this and that, that they actually played such a major role. They just do it a little bit more behind the scenes. There's obviously less women in CEO roles or president roles in companies. But a lot of those men in those positions, if you go into their household, they're not the president of their family, they're not the CEO of their family. Their wife runs their show. So it's almost like there's different roles that we can take. So let's take the CEO thing. If a guy maybe has more of the wiring in order to go there 9 to 5, 8 to 4, whatever, 8 to 7, whatever it is, every single day, put in the work, manage people, be driven, do all this stuff, be willing to have hard conversations and do this stuff. If they're more wired for that, then that's fine. But that doesn't mean the wife at home is useless or is not contributing to the family or is not contributing to the world economy or is not this or that. She's probably what's keep allowing this guy to be. And Ali Wong, she's a comedian, and she had like a pretty funny take on this where she's like, women, we had it great. We were just like hanging out at home. We were doing our thing, and now we're all being forced into the workforce. But like take a step back and not think of it like as a joke, but like take it more seriously, is their role is probably the better role to have anyways. Like who's really has the more power in that family. If just to use the classic CEO example, if he's out there throwing his suit on every single day, going out there and working and having these tough meetings and having a lot of emails and calls and the stresses that come with that, and the wife is at home just telling him to keep going and taking care of the family and making sure everything is working from a household perspective. I mean, who's to say which one of those is better? But yeah, does that kind of make sense?
It does, yeah. And
Yeah.
I guess like I have a little bit of a different take on it, but kind of in the same realm where a lot of those, not requirements, but call them tendencies, right?
Yeah.
Where you know sometimes there's one partner that's more loving, more caring, more likes taking care of the kids, likes making sure everything's organized at home. For me, it's removing that idea that has to be a female. For me,
Totally.
that's like
Yeah.
sometimes the wife or the female partner in that relationship, she's the killer. She's the one that wants to be going out every day, having those tough conversations, taking those tough
Totally.
calls, and really running things at a company, being a CEO, being a boss, being a president, whatever it might be. And that's okay. And I think taking that away, that it has to be the man that goes out and does that, right? And
Totally.
that the woman can't be that earner, can't be that like call it, for lack of a better term, more like alpha one in the relationship, right?
Yeah.
The breadwinner, the earner, whatever you want to call it. And for me, a huge one is removing that stigma. And on the opposite side, for the man too, for the man that wants to be the stay-at-home dad, for the man that, really wants that work-life balance, he'll let the, wife take the lead professionally, and he wants to take care of the home, making sure that that's okay too. And I think,
Totally.
that's the big one of looking at it more as individuals instead of as a gender, right?
Hmm.
Those tendencies, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're a man because you have those tendencies and vice versa. It's a lot of, well, see where you actually fit and what works best for you and in your family unit, and then pursue that instead of feeling like it has to be this way, and this.
Yeah,
you know
totally.
the other point that you made, which I resonate a ton with, and it's something that I've been talking a lot about, is that idea that a lot of times, as men, the only emotion you're allowed to show usually is anger, right? You're not allowed to show any
Hmm.
other emotions. You have to be this, strong stoic figure that only takes on other people's problems. And, if you show emotion, that's weakness. And that's one that I've really been kind of, thinking about and talking about and pushing against, where, you can still be vulnerable and show emotion and still be strong. And a
Yeah,
lot of times it actually makes you stronger if you can show those things and still, still have that strength about you, and, show that you can have these imperfections and these flaws, and it doesn't take anything away from you. So, personally, that's kind of my take on it, but I'm always interested to hear what people think, because, it's just such an interesting topic that, has really, for me, it comes down to just the shoulds, the like,
mhm.
you're a man and so you should do this, you're a woman and so you
Yeah,
should do this, you're young so you should do this, whatever it might
totally.
be.
Yeah.
And just kind of fighting against those and questioning some of those. So
Yeah, totally. I couldn't agree more about the shoulds. And that's something that we're all questioning a lot now, right? And like, especially with gender roles and how we are supposed to act as males and females, is there right there in that the language, right? It's like, how should we act? Or maybe there isn't a should. Maybe we should just be acting the way that we um, personally see fit, in the way that we want to interact with the world and with our spouse and with this and with that. And because there's something that happens, it's in psychology. I don't know the exact term for this, but essentially people in a social group, they take on different roles because everyone can't be taking the same role. We naturally know this. So like, back to the example of like, if you, me, and like two other guys go skiing or snowboarding, naturally someone is going to take the role of, okay, I'm the ideas person, I'm going to come up with the idea, where are we going to go do our lunch, where are we going to meet in the morning, how are we going to do this. There's going to be someone who's like the executor, and this is just like roles that people naturally take on. So it's like, okay, so and so came up with this plan, let's all do it. Okay, we all got to be here, we got to do this thing. Okay, we're going to go there in 20 minutes, whatever it is. There's going to be someone who's there to just keep the group kind of together, almost like the social glue. They're going to alleviate tension, this and that. And the fourth, I forget what the fourth role is, but essentially we take these roles on in social settings, but we're not fixed to any one of those roles. And I think you can probably like attest to this. I know I definitely can. Depends what group I'm in. Sometimes I'm the ideas person, sometimes I'm the executor, sometimes I'm just the glue trying to keep everything together and keep all these battling personalities at bay. So I think with marriage it's totally that, right? And like in relationships, and just realizing that, one, it's not even like, if you're going to take, let's say, a certain role in a marriage, that doesn't mean that that's your personality. That's just like how you figured out a way to relate to that other person, or in relationships, or even in the workplace. It doesn't need to be like this false dichotomy, like fixed situation of like, this is my personality and this is how I'm always going to be in every situation. It's a lot more fluid than that. Like, we take on different roles with different people, and sometimes we're the one bringing things up, sometimes we're the one bringing things down, sometimes we're doing this or that. And just realizing that as well is like, you can be the boss in the boardroom, but you can also go home and kind of like be the more docile one, or you can do it in the opposite direction as well. And that's I think one just to circle back to my point before about the CEOs and the wife at home. I think my real the underlying point I was trying to make was, a lot of times we see the CEO that's out there doing the work as the boss in the relationship, not realizing that the boss in the relationship is sitting at home. So I think there has in certain times there's been a missed characterization of like all these times over the years. There's like the man out there earning, doing whatever the job is, and the woman's at home. They're almost in a lesser than position. And obviously, in certain instances, that can be the case. He has more of the access to capital, and he probably has more of his name on certain assets and this and that. And he has, at certain points, like the ability to vote and own a home and all these certain things. But there was a lot of instances where she actually had a lot more of the power in the relationship, and it was almost it just wasn't clear to the outside. So I think we're unpacking a lot of these nuances too, because it's hard for us to look back like, okay, how were things 100 years ago? And history books don't provide us a lot of insight, nor do like even personal experiences, because then you're just getting antidotes. And I think that's what we're getting better at now, is realizing, okay, this is how things actually were, and this is how things actually are now, and this is how we can sort of move forward from here. Because history is like the greatest teacher, but that's the problem with history, is it's really hard to get an accurate sort of depiction of what was actually happening.
For sure. No, I love that. And, we are wrapping up here, but I wanted to ask if there's anything that we didn't get to that you wanted to talk about, or anything that you wanted to say at all.
Uh, yeah, I guess one more thing about the masculinity with emotions, is that is one thing that's kind of coming up for me over this, is sometimes there is also a double standard with males, where it's like, okay, we want you to show emotion, but don't show the wrong emotions. Whereas a lot of times on the female side of things, it's like someone could act a certain way and, like, let's say demonstrate or exhibit emotions that we can all agree they're lower on the tier of like emotions we want to be experiencing or demonstrating, whether it's anger or resentment or jealousy or this or that. So oftentimes, like, if we typically in society will say, okay, women, they are more emotional, and therefore these lower end emotional states, these are just kind of like they come part, it's part of it, right? That's just part of like them being more emotional, is they're going to then demonstrate these ones. Whereas with men, there's this pressure now, not pressure, but there's definitely like a push towards, hey, we want you to show more emotion. But then we say, but no, like, don't show anger. That's wrong emotion. Suppress that one. Like, absolutely don't show that one. Show maybe some of these other ones. And I can imagine for a lot of men out there, it's kind of confusing, where it's like half the time they're being pressured to suppress emotions, half the time they're being celebrated when they express these other ones. So I think that's one thing that also needs to be addressed. Whereas with women, it's a little bit easier for us to say, okay, these are emotions we don't want you to, let's say, lean into, and these are ones that we maybe do want you to lean into. But they've been allowed to express them more on a full spectrum for a very, very long time. Whereas for men, we're just sort of learning, okay, we can express our emotions, but now there's a lot of boundaries around which ones we can and can't. So I think we can apply the double standard to us, to the men out there. And not to say that we should all just be able to get the pass and be angry all the time, or be resentful, or be jealous, or be any of these sort of lower emotional states. But I think we also need to figure out a way of, okay, how can we recharacterize these lower level emotions, and how can we kind of like up them into better emotional states? Or how can we perceive things differently, or shift this emotional state into a more constructive one instead of a destructive one? So I think that's going to be a big one, because yeah, males expressing emotion, it's definitely been something that we've been taught over the years. Don't do it, suppress it. That's not being strong. That's not being a strong leader in your family, in your relationship, in your workplace, this or that. And then they kind of, it seems, then obviously I'm not an expert in this, but it seems like this kind of has created a situation where males are more likely to kind of blow up into these lower level emotional states, where we need to at least help. And I don't necessarily know how to do this. Maybe you do, or with the King of Hearts, maybe they do, but just how to up-regulate emotional states from these more destructive ones to more constructive ones.
For sure, and I definitely don't consider myself an expert by any means.
Yeah.
While you were talking there, what was kind of coming up for me was, I think the first step though is accepting that whatever the emotion is, it is valid because it is your emotion, and allowing yourself first to express it. is, and at least acknowledge it, is so important. And then asking why, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think a lot of times when we deny ourselves those emotions is when, again, I kind of like, the way I think about it is keeping it in the dark and letting it fester. And then, what does that lead to in the future? Of, oh, I shouldn't, again, and going back to those shoulds and shouldn'ts of, I shouldn't be feeling this way. So I feel jealous, but I shouldn't be feeling this way. So I'm going to keep it tucked away and pretend that it's not there. And then it's going to either, create so much pressure that, there's an explosion eventually, or it's going to come up in different ways. Okay, I'm not allowed to
Mm-hmm.
be jealous, so I'm going to be angry. I'm not allowed to be jealous, so I'm going to be sad, or it's going to affect my self-worth wherever it goes. And so that's, for me at least, that's one of the most important things, is that just accepting that all emotions are valid, but the important part being asking why.
Mm.
Why are you feeling jealousy? Why are you feeling resentment? Why are you feeling these? And then that for me is the hard part,
Right.
digging into those of, am I actually jealous because they have a nicer car than me? Or does it go down to, I feel that they're better than me because they have a nicer car, right? Does it actually
Right.
go back to my view of myself and my self-worth on, that's why I'm feeling jealous? And, I think that's a lot of times is that next step that not a lot of people are willing to take, of, taking almost the ownership of that emotion. Now, why am I
Yeah.
feeling that way? And digging into it. And that's really the tough work and the important work too. So yeah, so when you're
Mm-hmm.
talking, that was what was coming up for me is, the first part, allowing everybody to feel those emotions, and the second part, going into them and asking why and trying to figure out where they come from for those, for all of them, but especially those, kind of lower tier emotional states.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good take on that. And I'll definitely start to share some of that with the people that kind of come up in my life, whether they're friends, family members, practice members, who need to sort of do that work and sort of digging a little bit deeper. This is the anger I'm experiencing, and that's okay. Like, I'm not going to label that. I'm not going to judge that. I'm not going to try to suppress it.
Yeah.
But this probably isn't a good emotional state to be arriving at every single day for the rest of my life. Therefore, how can I recharacterize, or how can I look at this and dive deeper so that I don't end up here every single day? And that's like, yeah, I think that's the same with a lot of those. It's like, if you're jealous about something, yeah, like you said, acknowledge it. Don't try to suppress it. Don't try to think I'm not allowed to be jealous. But also realizing, okay, I can't become jealous of every single relationship, every single day of every single week for the rest of my life. I'm going to have no one left in my life. I'm going to have no healthy relationships, and my mental health is also probably going to suffer from that. So how can I do the work on this time, and then hopefully next time I don't arrive back here?
Yeah, for sure. Amazing.
Cool.
Thank you for bringing that last point up. I really enjoyed going into that. So,
Yeah,
um,
cool. Thanks.
amazing. So, what would be the best way for people to get in touch with you if they're interested in connecting?
Yeah, totally. Probably Instagram is the easiest one. So just Dr. Keith Belliveau on Instagram. Yeah, that's probably the easiest.
Awesome. And so, final question is, what does this next phase in your journey look like?
Oh man, I was having a conversation about this just a couple weeks ago, because we just had our first year open in the clinic, and it was a lot of growth. And it's really easy to get back to, like, characterizing things as American or more European. Like, the American way is just keep building and growing, and bigger is better, and just keep building the empire and keep growing, growing, growing always. And a lot of times in, like, the European way of things is, don't do that. That doesn't sound like a good way to, like, live a meaningful, purposeful, happy life. You build things when you need to build things, and then you can just, like, then you can stop building, you can stop growing, and you can just, like, sort of take a step back and reap the benefits of that and focus on other aspects of your life. So I think for us at Curo, like, we're at a point where we're still going to continue to grow over this year, but it's not going to be as much growth as we did last year, because that took a lot of time and energy and resources on our end to sustain that growth and to allow for that. So for this next year, it's going to be, okay, we're going to continue to grow, but it's not going to take every ounce of our beings to do so. And we can focus a lot more of our time and energy on other aspects of our life. So that's going to be, I think, the next chapter, is like really dialing in the lifestyle. Because, like, back to what I said, that's like, that's what health is, and that's what living an enjoyable life is like figuring out a way to go through your week or your months or your year in an enjoyable way. It can't just all be sitting at home watching TV. It can't all be working. It can't just be exercising all day, every day. But it's a combination of all of these things and just figuring out a way that you can sort of do everything that you need to do. And that's going to be my focus this year is like, how can I exercise the amount I need to, see friends the amount that I need to, have time for family, have time for recovery, have time to spend time with Charlotte, my fiance, and go walk the dog, and also spend time at Curo and make sure we're still doing everything here for, getting the amazing results we get with our patients and creating the environment to do so. And how can I start to like level out the lifestyle a little bit? Because it's definitely been in the last couple of years a little bit more favoring the business here in the clinic, and for good reason. And I'm happy that we did it. But now it's going to be okay. How can we try to create a sustainable, balanced lifestyle? And that's going to be, I think, my goal in the next phase.
Awesome. Love that so much. Thanks again for doing this. I really appreciate you. Can't wait to see you again, and we'll connect soon. Okay.
You too, man. Thanks for having me on. It was great. Have a good day.